show is that from?
Simpsons.
Oh.
I said it first.
Y'all are pretty good on the shows.
It's a bird.
What do you want?
Simpsons.
Your eyes, sir? Huh?
All right.
Do you want to with your eyes?
So, this chapter is all about thinking and intelligence. We're going to take a little IQ test this chapter. Should be interesting. We're going to see why people are illogical and irrational in the way they think. And because of what you learn here, you're going to be able to outthink most people out there. You can thank me for it. Of course, I don't teach this, so I can already outthink you guys.
So, this chapter's over. How we think?
All right.
That's that card.
First of all, you need to know these terms. What is a concept? A mental category that groups objects. It's kind of the first thing you learn in life, the different concepts. For instance, own is a concept. That means you possess it. Kind of a thought that you get. You own something. Dog is a concept. That's a little four-legged creature that runs around. It's cute. It's furry. Emotion is a concept. Fear, anger, joy, sadness, things that you feel. These are concepts. Now, a prototype is a commonplace example of a concept. So a prototype dog might be something like a Labrador. When you think dog, you think of something like a Labrador. You don't usually think of something like a Chihuahua or something like one of those real furry ones that you can't hardly see their face, or whatever. You usually think of something like a Labrador, just a normal dog. Or if I say car, what do you think of? You think of, probably a sedan, a four-door, just a normal car. You don't think of a Lamborghini, or you don't think of the Batmobile or something. You think of just the normal car. So we call that a prototype. A prototype is a common example of the concept.
You're welcome.
Now the concepts, as you see in this little map here, which might be good for you to familiarize yourself with, the concepts come together to make propositions. So a proposition is a unit of meaning made up of concepts and expresses a single idea. I own a very emotional dog. That puts those three concepts that I said earlier together. Now that's a proposition. I own a very emotional dog. You kind of get an idea of the situation here. I got a dog that gets real mad or cries a lot or it's real happy, and it's mine. So that's three concepts put together in one. Right? Are y'all with me? You do this in your brain. You put together concepts to make a proposition. So if I wrote on a test, I own a very emotional dog, is A concept, B proposition, C mental image, D cognitive schema, what would you put?
Proposition.
Very nice. Now, the proposition, this idea I have, goes together with mental images. When I said I owned a very emotional dog, you may have thrown in some mental images. I did. I kind of looked down even when I was explaining this, because I was imagining this dog who's very emotional, kind of looking at me when I get home. Very emotional dog. And I got a little picture. Mine's kind of white and curly hair. Crazy dog. I used to have a dog named Belvedere. Very emotional dog. So you throw in your mental images. Mental images are pictures from the brain. So the mental images together with the proposition makes a cognitive schema. The cognitive schema is the overall product of propositions put together with mental images. This this all goes on in your head while you're talking to one another. And so, when I come in and I say, God, I got a real emotional dog, you start thinking. And you throw in images and you pull together all those concepts and you understand the proposition, and now you have a picture. As soon as I say it, it happens real quick. Picture of what's going on in my life. And so throughout your thinking and talking to one another, you're doing this. You're putting all these things together. Did you know you were doing that? Probably not. You probably just never thought about it. So we call this cognition. Cognition is the thinking and putting together of all of these things. Now, you do some of it consciously and some of it subconsciously. Sometimes you're trying to think of things consciously. A lot of times you're doing it subconsciously without realizing you're doing it. Subconscious processes are mental processes occurring outside of conscious awareness, but accessible to consciousness when necessary. There's a lot of things you do that are subconscious that you're not aware of. For instance, how do your clothes feel rubbing up against your skin right now? Well, you weren't conscious that you were feeling your clothes rubbing up against your skin until you think about it. And now that I think about it, I can feel my shirt up against my arm right there. All I got to do is think about it. I can bring it to conscious awareness. My brain is aware of how my clothes feel against my skin at all times. But I'm not conscious of any of it until I start to think about it. It may be brought to my consciousness if I have a little tag that's rubbing against my neck. Don't you hate that? I love those new tagless t-shirts. Back when I was a kid, you had to deal with the tags. It's terrible. And they were thick, painful tags. And everyone was miserable. Now they figured that out. So anyway, there are a lot of processes going on in your head that are subconscious. What about non-conscious? Non-conscious means there are processes going on in your head that are in your subconscious, you're not aware of them, and you can't even pull them to awareness. Have you ever had a solution to a problem just pop in your head?
Yes.
Somebody's name you were thinking of earlier and you've forgotten, and like 4 hours later it pops in your head? The reason why it popped in your head is some of your brain was working on that problem and you didn't even know it. And finally your brain figured it out, and then it brought it to your consciousness. This part of the brain over here, and we don't understand where it is, but some part of the brain is going, what was that guy's name? I've been working on this for 3 hours. It was Ralph. Calls it to consciousness. Hey, it was Ralph. Remember the one I was thinking of earlier? I just remembered it. Your brain was actually working on that. Isn't that interesting? We call that a non-conscious process. You don't even know you're aware that you're working on a lot of these problems. A lot of famous scientists have said that they dreamed the solution. They thought of it in their sleep, or just suddenly came to them the solution to this science problem that they were working on, or math problem. A lot of math people say that. And actually they were working on it in their brain, but they weren't even aware of it. They figured it out. Mindlessness is one of the results of these subconscious or non-conscious processes. Mindlessness is when you act, speak, or make decisions from your subconscious habit rather than conscious awareness. The other day I walked into my kitchen and I walked over to the refrigerator and I opened it and I stared in there, and then I thought, why am I doing this? I just came up to the refrigerator and opened it. Because my subconscious is kind of in control that when I walk in the kitchen, I usually go to the refrigerator. And I wasn't even hungry. Does this ever happen to you?
Yes.
You just do something
Yes.
out of
The
habit.
cabinets are instantly open.
Yeah. You know, you may turn to a certain channel out of habit when you know you're not even going for that. Or there's so many things that your subconscious controls. And like, for instance, you get out of the cab at the airport and the guy says, "Have a nice flight," and you say, "You too." You normally, when somebody comes with something like blah 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 blah, you go, "You too," because you're just used to saying that. You're not really listening to what he says. You see, your subconscious is taking over and is working for you. And the cabbie says, "Yeah, I'll remember that next time I fly. I appreciate that." Of course, you know, I tipped him big because I got that kind of cash. Anyway, we call that mindlessness, acting out of your subconscious habit. You have a lot of programs that just take over, you know, and you just do your thing without thinking. I remember one day when I first started teaching, I woke up, I got dressed, I took a shower, I got in the car, I pulled out of the neighborhood, I got on the road, I said, "Nobody's on the road. This is weird. It's Saturday. I don't have to go to work today." I was in full subconscious mode. This was the happiest moment of my life, by the way. That was the pinnacle. I suddenly realized I had a whole day off. Man, that was great. I don't think I'll ever be that happy again. Let's see. Now, the next section of the book talks about reasoning. Reasoning that goes on in your head to solve problems. Sometimes you come to problems that have a solution. And there's two ways of reaching the solution to a problem. Not all problems have good solutions, but some do. And the first way we call deductive reasoning. By the way, figuring out the answers to problems is also known as logic. Have you ever heard of logic before? Y'all know who Mr. Spock is, by the way?
Who doesn't?
He's operated completely on logic. How many know who Mr. Spock is? Raise your hand.
Is that the Star Trek?
Yeah, he's in Star Trek. It was an old show that was big in the 60s and 70s. 1960s and 70s. Anyway, Spock always used logic to figure out his problem. So here's how logic works. Deductive reasoning is when one thing is true and another thing is true, you put them together and come to a conclusion, and that conclusion must be true. And sometimes you can stack these things on another. It might take 1, 2, 3, 5 things that are true to lead to some conclusion. This is what, if you watch Sherlock Holmes, he says, well, if this happened, and this happened, and this happened, then this must be true. He puts it all together, you see. And so we call that deductive reasoning. Here's an example. All PE classes are in the gym. I have 5th period PE. What's your conclusion that you come to from this?
We gotta go to the gym in 5th period.
I gotta be in the gym 5th period. There you put 2 things that are true together, and the third thing must be true. I mean, if this is true, and this is true, then I gotta be in the gym 5th period. Has to be true. Okay? That's deductive reasoning. Now, sometimes it's not as easy as that because there are several things that must be true for this other thing to be true, and you got to notice them all, and that's what good mystery novels are all about. Noticing them all and putting them all together to get to the conclusion. You know, The game Clue. Have you ever played the game Clue? It kind of works on this. You put once you get enough clues, you can put them all together and come up with a result. And you got to think a little bit about it. They used to play board games when I was a kid, before there were video games. How y'all doing today? Pretty good?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there's Sherlock Holmes. Looks a little bit different than the guy they have in the movies nowadays. The old Sherlock Holmes was not like a fighter like, what's his name? Robert Downey Jr. is. He didn't like... He just solved it with his brain. Now they got him like flipping around, fighting and stuff. I guess it's actually better the way it is now. But anyway. Now, so that's deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is a little bit different. Inductive reasoning is when there's a premise is a statement. So one premise is true, another premise is true. If you stack enough premises together, you get a conclusion that's probably true, but there's always a possibility of something else happening that would make the conclusion not true. And it's hard to describe this without an example, so let me give you an example. Mr. Willis's first test was hard. True? Then you would say yes. Mr. Willis's second test was hard. True? Then he would say yes. So if my first test was hard and my second test was hard, what do you conclude from that?
The third test will be hard.
The third test will be hard. Or you might conclude Mr. Willis's tests are hard. Is that absolutely going to be true 100% of the time? Maybe not, because there's a possibility of discrepant information. Like, for instance, there's a possibility that my third test is incredibly easy. And then you might change your conclusion. So in inductive reasoning, I always remember in inductive reasoning there's a possibility that the conclusion is not true. In deductive reasoning, going back, the conclusion has to be true. There's no possibility that the conclusion is not true. In deductive reasoning, there's a definite answer. In inductive reasoning, the conclusion is probably true, but not necessarily. Are y'all with me here? What you reading, Sean? That's good stuff, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
Snow falling on the cedars.
Ah. Let's see. Sean wasn't paying attention this day. He wasn't paying attention this day. Deductive reasoning. I'm picking on you a little bit, but I can do that. Now sometimes there is no best answer. You come to a lot of problems that there's no best answer. I'll give you a problem Sean is working on now there's no real best answer to. What do? I got all this work piled up. I could listen here, but then I do bad on this, or I could do this. So what is going to be my answer to this problem? Well, a heuristic is sometimes used to solve problems in which you don't know what the best thing to do is. Have y'all ever heard of a heuristic? That means a rule of thumb. Here's a rule of thumb you use in play. How many of y'all play poker? Raise if you have an ace high or better when you get your cards at first. If you have an ace high or better, go ahead and raise. That's just a rule of thumb. You don't always do it. If this guy in front of you raised and that guy raised, you might not want to raise if you just have ace high. But it's a pretty good rule of thumb that you can act on. I'm talking about Texas Hold'em. How many of y'all are great at Texas Hold'em? We'll see.
I don't gamble.
I'm pretty good.
We should have a game sometime.
Maybe. So, a heuristic is a rule of thumb. It guides problem solving, but does not guarantee a solution. Then there's what we call dialectical reasoning. Some people do this. Dialectical reasoning is when you write out lists of pros and cons. When Charles Darwin was wondering whether to get married, he famously wrote out a list. Pros of getting married and cons of getting married. And he went over the two things, and he looked at it, and he decided he'd get married. He married his cousin. Had a bunch of kids. That might have been on the con side. She's your cousin. The lot on the pro side. One, well, guess what was on the pro side? She had a lot of money. That was on his pro side. Somebody found that list after he died.
Good thing his wife didn't find it.
I don't know if his wife knew about the list. That's a good question. So, Sean has pros and cons here. The con against studying something else in class is teacher might find you and get upset. The pro is you actually learn the material that you have to test on in the next class. So y'all go through deciding this stuff all the time. When you don't have there's no perfect solution. You can't both listen and study for that. So what do? Sort of pay attention and study something else, and maybe you can get some other worlds, right? You're doing this, and you didn't even realize it.
Thank you, Sean.
Dialectical reasoning.
You're so smart, Sean.
I know. It scared me. She gets her she's like, oh.
The last part of the reading tonight is on judgment. Reflective judgment, the ability to evaluate and integrate evidence, relate that evidence to a theory. So when we talk about reflective judgment, we're talking about using the evidence to make decisions. And how often that is done. Some people do that all the time. And some people don't. And it's often related to your age and your maturity level and your intelligence level. And there was a guy, and I was looking for his name here, and I can't find it, King and Kitchener had stages to reflective judgment, stages to how well you use evidence in making your decisions. We call that judgment. A judge is a professional that's hired to sit in court and take people from the public and listen to the evidence and make judgments based on that evidence. That's using reflective judgment as your job. And so you're not supposed to do it the way stage 1 goes. Stage 1 and 2 is I was brought up to believe, or I just know what I know. You ever hear some people say that? Mm-hmm. They're not using evidence to come up with a reason for the way they think. They're just saying, I was just brought up to believe that. You wouldn't want to hear your judge go, I was just brought up to believe that, you shouldn't do this, bam. And he doesn't give you a good reason. That's not a very good reason if somebody said that for something they were doing. And so those are the earlier stages. And this is what you tend to say things like this when you haven't really considered the pros and cons or the evidence and that sort of thing. I remember I was watching shortly after I taught this one year, I was watching a beauty contest, and the girl they called up there, they said, give us your opinion on gay marriage. And she said, well, I was just brought up to believe that's not the right thing to do. And everybody in the audience applauded. And I was like, that's the last I'm watching a beauty contest. So that's a good answer? So I said, that's what I was teaching just yesterday. That's a very early stage of reasoning.
Such as.
Now you're getting there, you're on your way there when you're saying things like, we have a right to our opinion, and you can never know anything for sure. Those are the third and fourth stages. These are correct statements, but you're still not using the evidence to justify your opinion as well as you could. And then the final stages, when you're saying something like, based on the evidence, I believe, or one can conclude from the previous information that, and you follow that up with reasons that make sense, then you're using what they call reflective judgment. And those are the later stages. So I'm not going to make you memorize all 7 stages and such. But what they might ask you on a test is, if somebody says, I was just brought up to believe, would that be more like stage 1 of reflective judgment or stage 7 of reflective judgment? You would say stage 1. That's an early stage. And you see people progress through these stages as they get older and more mature and more intelligent. So think about this in your own life when you're giving reasons for things, reasons why you voted for so-and-so, reasons why you believe you should be able to, I don't know, get off-campus lunch. If you say, Mr. Temple, we should get off-campus lunch because that's what I was brought up to believe, he's not going to listen to you. Maybe getting there on your way, one of the middle stages is, they got it, we should get it. Pretty good, but not really. You still haven't addressed the reason. I think we should get off-campus lunch because we're going to be going away in college next year. And we'll be able to go wherever we want, whenever we want. And we need to be able to learn how to handle that kind of freedom. And he might listen to you. Good question there. Good judgment there. That was good. Here's why I'm not letting you do it. You all have demonstrated that when you go off campus, you get into drugs. Here are my examples of that. This is why we don't let you go off campus. I don't know that happened. I just brought that up. But I'm probably right. Kidding. I know y'all are good. If it was up to me, I'd let you all go whenever you want.
Well, that's for high school.
See? Now I'm the good guy. All right, so you read through 221, and we're starting a little video here. We won't get too much of it, but this is a guy named John Stossel. And the video is old, but it's kind of a news report. And he's talking about common mental judgment errors that the public makes. And you'll probably see some errors that you make in this video. So it's